Praised as a new generation of cameras, the Canon AE-1 program was, at the time, the camera to get. If I could recommend one camera that most people should start film on, this would be it.
When I'm assigned to shoot a guy like John Newcomb, I pack my Canon AE-1 with several lenses. Because I'm after more than just John's form. Creativity means capturing his intensity. Try it, John. Me? Sure.
Hey guys, my name is Jose. This is the Canon AE-1 program. Let's get into it. Being one of my favorite film cameras of all time, the AE-1 program was a successor to the AE-1. It introduced program AE, or auto mode, and it quickly sold off store shelves. The photos were sharp, crisp, and the auto functionality allowed basically anyone to use this camera. Now specs wise, this camera kills it. This is an electronic auto and manual exposure, manual focus, 35mm SLR. It's offered in both silver and black, and it only weighs 20 ounces. It's easy to carry around, and it fits pretty good in the palm of your hand. It even has a little action grip on the right hand side that covers the battery cover, but it gives you enough space to put your fingers on it, and I really like how this camera feels. Speaking of the battery, it does need a 6-volt battery to kind of power the whole thing, but you can find those at really any specialty battery store or online. You're mainly looking for a 4LR44 battery to slot into this thing. Now, the viewfinder is bright, man, and I mean bright. It's a joy to shoot with. It's a glass pentaprism, and unlike the AE-1, right, the camera that came before it, this one you can actually very easily change the focusing screens. Now, to be honest with you, I've never felt the need to do that. I actually really like the split focusing screen that this camera comes with by default, but if you didn't like it, you do have the option to. Unlike the previous AE-1, which you needed to send to a camera professional to get it calibrated when changing the focusing screen, this should be user-friendly, so just kind of keep that in mind. The meter is center weighted, letting you meter anywhere from 12 to 3200 ISO. And look, I know the correct term is ASA, not ISO, but like, no one asked you, okay? So leave me alone. The shutter on this thing goes from 1/1000th to 2 seconds, and even more if you want to use bulb mode, which is great because you can basically at bulb mode pick whatever long exposures you want. It has the option for a shutter release cable, a shutter release button, flash sync at 1/60th of a second, and even a self timer option for the shutter at 10 seconds. So overall, you can do whatever you want with this thing. It gives you the options to do so. And overall, while the camera is mainly made of plastic, the chrome plated plastic that's on the top or the bottom feels really good. Like, it feels like actual metal. So in terms of like weight and size, this is the perfect camera to take on hikes or really whenever you go outside. If you want to shoot film but don't want anything cumbersome, this is a great option. Now, we can't go over the camera without covering the lens that it's usually associated with, the legendary Canon 50mm f1.8 NFD lens. Now, this NFD lens is interesting because components wise, it's cheap, right? It's made of plastic. The coating on it is only an SC coating, not like the SCC coatings that were on Canon's other lenses at the time. So what does that mean? Really, it just means that you might get a little bit more solar flare and lens flare when shooting directly into the sun. There might be some weird things with colors, but it's very nitpicky. For the price that you're getting this lens at, it's totally worth it. With a minimum focusing distance of 0.6 meters, yeah, it is kind of made out of plastic, but it's a 50mm 1.8, which honestly, that's all I really wanted. There's not much issues with this lens. It feels great. And yeah, there is some vignetting all the way up to around 5.6, but I like the look of vignetting. But just keep in mind that if that's not what you're going for, maybe don't pick this lens up. The images are sharp. It feels great to use. The focusing ring is smooth. The one thing to kind of keep in mind is because it's plastic, you might think of it as a cheap lens, but the images I've shot with it are fairly sharp. And I actually like that it's made of plastic because it means it's lighter. If it was made of a metal, other than it's like titanium or some aluminum, it would generally be heavier. So I don't mind that this is made of major plastic parts because it's so light, especially with the body. It's the perfect travel lens. Now, whether you want to admit it or not, film is largely for the experience. And there's nothing wrong with that, like seriously. There's something calming about sharing in the film process. You know, you think about your composition more, you're meticulous with how you frame your subject, and when you shoot, you're in tune with your environment. You know, there's something special about shooting film that you don't get with digital cameras. And this camera really only serves to enhance that feeling. It's a beautiful looking camera, right? You want to go out and shoot with this. The shutter is crisp and clear, and the program fits perfectly in your hands. Simply put, the AE-1 program just shoots. There's nothing to get in your way with this camera. You can just immerse yourself in the experience. Even if you don't know what you're doing, just throw it on auto. You'll get usable images. Yeah, it doesn't feel as premium as a Leica, but it's a tenth of the price. And honestly, for what you're getting, it's totally worth it. Okay, so costs. How much does it cost you to pick one of these things up? So for the body alone, you're looking at around 100 to 150 bucks. If you want to get the usual lens too of 50 millimeters, it'll also run you an extra 100 for a grand total of 200 to 250, depending on where you find it, if it's local, online, the condition it's in, etc., etc. But keep in mind, since it's a film camera, you might think, oh, that's fairly cheap for one of the best cameras of all time. You also have to factor in the prices of film. For example, I mainly shoot Ektachrome 100 slide film. It's great, I love it. But because the price of it is so freaking expensive nowadays, it's basically like shooting medium format film. So yeah, for the price, this camera is cheap. But think of the cost of buying film, the cost of getting it developed. If you send it off, shipping and handling, all that stuff, just know that just because you get this camera, your wallet isn't done yet, right? So just kind of keep that in mind. Now, when I first purchased this camera, I did have a few issues that I want to cover. First of all, I did have the infamous Canon shutter squeak. This happens to a lot of film cameras. It just makes the camera sound terrible when you shoot it. It is something you can fix at home, but I didn't want to risk anything, so I sent it off to a professional to get it cleaned and looked at. After that, the camera was great. Another issue I did have though is that I didn't realize that you really can't shoot this camera without a battery. It kind of needs the 6-volt. What happens is, if it doesn't have the battery in, the shutter can lock up and then you just can't take pictures. So make sure you have the battery installed. The batteries last for freaking ever. So don't worry about having to carry 3, 4, 5 batteries on you. Usually one is fine for months, even as long as you're careful. And if you're really worried about the battery running out, there's a switch near the shutter button where it has 3 letters, A, L, and S. If you have it on A, that basically means the camera's on. L, it's locked down, it's turned off. And then S at the bottom is for the shutter timer, so you can have your 10-second self-timer. Okay, so we covered the specs of this camera, but ultimately, what do the images look like, right? That's what we all want to know. So I'm going to show you a few sample images. Keep in mind for a few things. One of them is that they were all shot on Ektachrome 100. I love the slide film, I'm sorry. So that's what you're looking at in terms of colors and all that good stuff. But the other major thing to keep in mind is that all the images were shot using a black Pro Mist quarter filter. The issue is that I put this filter on this lens and I don't know what I did, but I literally can't take it off. Not even in a good way, it's physically stuck on there. I've tried a wrench, I've tried everything. I can't take this filter off. At some point I will buy another 50mm lens because they're so cheap. All the images are with the black Pro Mist. Just in case you notice a little bit more halation than you're used to, that's what it is. So without further ado, let's look at some images. Okay, so final thoughts on this camera. Initially, like I mentioned, I did have issues and it was aggravating, but once I got those things fixed, you know, it's an old camera. It was great. It's wonderful. And this is my main camera for everyday use for film. It's incredible. I have no issues with it at the moment. So I honestly can't recommend it enough. For the price, it's amazing. And I love Canon's older film cameras, and I want to pick up more vintage glass. I want specifically their 85mm FD lens. I think it's such a legendary lens. It's beautiful. So that's probably going to be my next purchase, which is rare because I don't ever buy more lenses for my film cameras. It's always just the stock ones that they come with. This should be, and you can fight me on this, everyone's first film camera. It's incredible. The auto setting is amazing. There's no bad things to say about this camera, especially for the price. The 50mm is my go-to focal range, and I think that's what everyone should start off on. 1.8 is perfect. It goes all the way up to f/22 if for some reason you want it. It has versatility, a good close focusing distance. It's a great lens. It's a great system. Pick one up. And in general, that's really all I have to say about this camera. This is also the 4th time I've filmed this video because my audio equipment keeps messing up. So I'm happy to just get this video out there. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions about this camera, I mean, I use it weekly, sometimes daily. So if you have anything you want to know, let me know and I'll reply to you in the comments. Pick one up if you don't have one. If you do have one, I hope this gave you a better idea of what it's like. And yeah, I'm probably going to be buried with this thing. This thing is amazing. Have a good rest of your day. Thank you so much for clicking on the video, and I'll talk to you next time. Peace.